All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alex Scarpito with the marketing department here at Bigleaf Networks, and we're here today to talk about Beyond Uptime, evaluating and assessing your internet maturity. So just to cover some housekeeping before we get started, we are recording this presentation and we'll send you a copy via email tomorrow so you can revisit it or share it with your team as you'd like. Also, we want to make sure to answer all of your questions following the presentation. So there is a box in the GoToWebinar control panel for questions. And if you have any during or after, please feel free to type in your questions and we'll get back to you after the webinar with answers. And I'm excited to be joined this morning by Jeff Burchett, Bigleaf co-founder and CSO, and he's going to walk us through the presentation today. And so thank you again for joining us. And Jeff, I'll kick this off to you.
Perfect, thanks, Alex. Appreciate the nice introduction. I also want to thank our Big Leaf friend and sales engineer extraordinaire, Dave Calwait, for joining the call today. Dave is here to answer tough questions and make me look good, so we appreciate that. Most of all, I want to thank all of you attending today, whether you're attending live or catching this as a recording after the fact. We do understand that your time as an IT professional is limited and it's important, and we want to make sure you're getting practical value out of these webinars. Of which I'd like to put a special thank you out to those of you that are attending your second or third or multiple of these webinars. For those of you that this is your first time, this webinar is part of a series of webinars. And while we try to keep each webinar as a self-contained concept, oftentimes we build on concepts from previous webinars. For example, over the last few months, we've talked about how you calculate the cost of downtime, right? We know downtime is expensive, but how expensive is it to you and your organization? And how do you use that to develop an ROI when you're presenting a new solution to your executive team? We've also talked about the difference between uptime, right? Green light, red light on your router versus usable uptime, right? When the light on the router is green, but the internet is all but useless. How you understand the concept of usable uptime, how you define it for you and your organization, how you set benchmarks around it. And today we want to bring this together in this concept of the internet maturity model, right? This is a framework that we hope you can use to both understand and assess where you're at today and what it would take to ascend to further stages of internet maturity, as well as how you can use this model to have inter-department conversations within your organization. To present this, we're going to use an existing Bigleaf customer, which happens to be a healthcare customer, to kind of frame the story. But a lot of these concepts are not limited to only healthcare. It was just a nice backdrop for us to talk about this against, but I think you'll see the concepts and themes in here equally applicable to professional services, education, technology, any number of different industries that you and your organization may be a part of. So with that, let's dive in. Yeah, I don't think this statement is groundbreaking for any of you that are IT professionals. We all know this. We all live this every single day. But I do feel a responsibility to call out the very specific and important relationship between users and their satisfaction with the applications that they need to do their jobs day in and day out, and the underlying infrastructure supporting those applications. Oftentimes we overlook internet. We just assume that it's there and it's going to work as part of our digital transformation and cloud and SaaS strategies. Oftentimes that's not the case. And we need to plan for the challenges that the internet presents when the internet becomes part of our corporate network. So what does this look like? Well, problem number one, the stable walled garden of our corporate WAN is gone, right? If you think back to life before SaaS and cloud, we lived in a world where our most important applications lived on servers. Those servers were in racks. Those racks were in a server room or a closet down the hallway, and our users were connected via switches and Ethernet cables, maybe Wi-Fi, but still in a very finite and controlled and pretty environment that was the local area network. That's not the world we live in today. For many of us, our corporate network is the internet, and the internet can be a messy place to play. Right, this data here comes from our own internal data. Here at Bigleaf, we're monitoring thousands of internet connections 10 times a second across the US and Europe. And these are business internet connections. These aren't for residents. These are your traditional business internet connections. And the data that we see after doing this for almost 10 years is that the average business internet connection is down 31 hours a year. Now, that's shocking to a lot of people. For some of us, we wish it was only down 31 hours a year. But nevertheless, this is what it looks like quantified. Now, this isn't all at once, right? It may be 5 minutes here, it may be 15 minutes there, it may be at 3 o'clock in the morning when you don't have any users. Nevertheless, you need to understand and plan for the 31 hours of downtime a year. This number is big, but in my opinion, this isn't the scariest problem. The scariest problem is this. It's unreliable internet. It's this concept of unusable uptime, right? We understand this. We feel this in our personal lives all the time, right? Our internet's on, the green light is on, but at home, this manifests in the version of pixelation and lag in Netflix, and dropped audio in Spotify or iTunes, and the frustration of lag when our kids are complaining about their online games not performing the way that they expected them to. But in a business environment, the stakes are even higher because it's not Netflix, it's Zoom or Teams. It's not Spotify, it's Ring Central or 8x8 or whatever our unified communications platform is. And it's not our kids' Fortnite, it's Salesforce, it's NetSuite, it's real-time performance-sensitive SaaS applications that our users need to do their jobs. And oftentimes, this is the most frustrating issue because our users don't correlate this issue with bad internet. As far as they're concerned, the internet is up and running, it's the application's fault. And they're complaining to each of you, not saying, hey, we're having an issue with packet loss or latency, because they don't see that, right? They see it as, I hate Zoom, it sucks. Why do I have to use NetSuite? It's really frustrating and slow and laggy, and it's not doing what I need it to do. And oftentimes they're not complaining to you in real time. They're telling you about an issue with Zoom that happened 3 days ago. And you don't have the monitoring data or insight into the internet itself to understand what was really causing that issue. And when you put these problems together, there are real dollars involved. You know, these numbers here come to us from our friends at Gartner, and they averaged the cost of downtime across all industries and all market segments, SMB through enterprise. This number came out as the average. Now, keep in mind, there are some very big businesses that drag this average in a certain direction, but nevertheless, it's a very big problem. Now, this problem may not be a $9.3 million issue for you, but I guarantee it is a significant dollar value issue to you. If you ever want any help justifying or understanding the cost of that downtime, go check out our previous webinar, The Cost of Downtime. We can help you calculate this and understand how big this problem really is for you. But let's take this problem a little bit deeper. Let's talk about this in the case of a real business. This is an example of a real yet unnamed Bigleaf customer. This is someone we've worked on with a case study with. We're still waiting for their legal team to give us the thumbs up to publish the case study. So for the time being, we'll leave them nameless or anonymous. But nevertheless, this is their data. This is their story. We talk about them as a senior living community. In actuality, this is a management and operations business that runs senior living and outsource or extended rehabilitation facilities. In this case, they took over 30 plus locations across the US. And when they took them over, one of their charges was to make a significant upgrade to the tech stack. The previous management company had left this part of the business underfunded and really behind the times. So the IT team got to go in and do what a lot of you find is probably the most fun part of your job, right? You get to build in this scenario. They got to replace old servers and infrastructure with new cloud services. They got to rip out dated software applications and move to new and top of the line SaaS solutions. They got to upgrade all of the networking infrastructure, right? Yanking out old switches, replacing them with new Wi-Fi, moving away from old key systems and PBXs to a new UCaaS solution, and upgrading security in the form of new firewalls. And while the IT team got to do the things that they love, they got to build and upgrade and implement new solutions, they were met with plenty of challenges. And these challenges were especially frustrating because they weren't consistent. They were different depending on the location. They were different depending on the user. For some people, it was bad phone calls. For others, it was bad SaaS applications. For some, it was lack of connectivity. It manifested in a lot of different ways. And oftentimes it wasn't, hey, the internet's down, how do we get this up and running? It's, this application is frustrating, I hate using it. Our main point of contact said that he expected plenty of support calls when they moved to the new technology. These were a bunch of users that hadn't used new technology in quite some time, and there was going to be a learning curve. But he was surprised at the number of issues that came in and the fact that they weren't oftentimes learning or instructional issues, they were actual application issues. But he said when he really got scared wasn't when it was an overwhelming number of complaints, but actually when the complaints stopped. And he was worried that they stopped because they hadn't identified what the issues were. They hadn't made any changes. So why did people all of a sudden quit complaining? Well, they quit complaining because it turns out they had stopped using the solutions. They had gone back to more manual strategies and policies and tools and moved away from all the new tech that they had implemented in all of these locations. And this became very frustrating and concerning. This turned to the point of, hey, did we waste a bunch of money because we didn't get the right solutions in place, the type of things that our users love to use and give them the ability to do their jobs better? So they had to dig into the problem. And what they realized as the problem was pretty quickly was it was a network problem. But it goes back to that stable walled garden of the old land. These facilities were used to old technology in a very finite and controlled environment. They were now using applications that were riding over public internet connections. And they hadn't put the right internet infrastructure in place to get the most out of those applications. And it was causing major user issues. You know, really, when you look at it, it wasn't just internet outages, it was the poor performance. It was that unusable uptime. They didn't have performant internet in their environment to maximize the value and usability of those solutions, and they were causing a lot of frustration for all of these users. They were in a tough spot. So their IT team had to think of or frame the question around this. I want to call out two important parts of this question. How do you plan and execute to deliver a reliable foundation? Plan and execute. This is really important because oftentimes these decisions are not intra-team decisions, right? Depending on how you and your organization are set up, or if you're part of a third-party provider, like a managed service provider, you have to execute, but you also have to plan. Because part of that planning is building consensus across the business. These become inter-team discussions that you need to present how your solution is going to solve the problem and is worth the appropriate investment. To get to the root of this answer, we developed the Internet Maturity Path. As I had mentioned before, this is meant to be a framework for you to both use from an intra-team standpoint to really understand where you and your organization are at today and what it's going to take to ascend to the next phase, as well as give you a framework to have these discussions outside of your tech team, right? How you get buy-in from finance if you need budget approval, how you find the right executive sponsor, and how you bring the business together to reach that phase of strategic and ultimately innovation alignment. To get us started, we have to acknowledge that there are still some organizations that are operating off of a single internet connection in their offices today. You know, to be honest, if you are one of those organizations, I'm not here to change your mind and try to convince you to add multiple internet connections. Frankly, if you're still getting by on a single internet connection in today's day and age, it's probably because you're behind the curve on your digital transformation. And it isn't until you get further down that path that you're going to understand the need and the value of having multiple internet connections in a redundant and diverse environment. Don't worry, you'll ultimately get there. You'll understand when you implement that line of business application that you can't afford any downtime on, and there'll be plenty of solutions for you. Rather, I want to speak to everyone else that is part of this digital transformation, is further along and understanding where they fit in the challenges they're facing today. When we talk about internet maturity, we really start at this phase, this concept of disaster recovery. This is very basic failover. These are the things that, frankly, many of us have had in place for probably 10 plus years. A decade or more ago, we may have had specialized appliances that did some load balancing or failover. You know, but today, this is usually a function of our firewall. It's actually pretty hard to find a firewall in the market today that doesn't have multiple WAN or internet ports on it. And really, basic disaster recovery is really just a function of getting a second internet connection and plugging it into that second WAN port on your firewall. This can be a fairly simple or low-cost solution to deploy. We do need to acknowledge that if it's already built into our firewall, the only other cost is that second internet connection. But in a basic disaster recovery scenario, that second internet connection is a connection that while you're paying for it each and every month, you hope to never use it. Because if you use it, that means something bad happened and you had to go through the processes of implementing basic failover, and it was messy and ugly. So in an ideal state, you have an internet connection that you're paying for every single month, but fingers crossed you never have to actually use. I like to look at basic disaster recovery as a best effort solution that oftentimes looks very good on a whiteboard, but is not practical in today's day and age. And it's not practical for a couple reasons. First off, it really only accounts for major outages, long duration downtime on your primary internet connection. It does nothing for unusable uptime. There's no concept of internet degradation and failover at that point. This is really meant only when internet outages happen. And at the point that they happen, right, that failover process can be ugly. If you think about all the SaaS and cloud applications your users are using today, they're pointed at public IP addresses on your primary internet connection. At the point that your best effort failover kicks in, those applications are all dropped, sessions are dropped, Zoom calls die, Ring Central doesn't move over seamlessly, et cetera, because they all need to be pointed to new public IP addresses. Again, looks very good on a whiteboard, but is hard to implement or hard to take advantage of in today's day and age because the proliferation of SaaS and cloud applications in our environments today and how sensitive they are to these sorts of failovers. And then when the failover does happen, because it's so painful to cut everything over onto the new IP addresses, when the primary internet connection comes back up, we often wait to move back to that connection because we're worried that if we move back too soon, we're going to have flapping and we're going to go through that same pain of moving back and forth between public IP addresses. It becomes very frustrating and it calls into question the value of our SaaS and cloud applications. Oftentimes we talk to people that have this in place, and after a major outage, their management team will come to them and say, what happened? I thought we had disaster recovery. I thought we had this failover in place. And as IT professionals, you have to explain to them, we did, and it did fail over. It just wasn't seamless. This is usually when we move to stage 2 complaint response. This is when the pressure builds. Users are frustrated. They complain to their managers that the applications that they need to do their jobs aren't working. Those managers complain to you or maybe to the executive team, and you feel this need to fix it. But what are you left with to fix it? Oftentimes, the first place we go to are very dated solutions and strategies, things that have existed, again, for 10, 12 years and weren't built with SaaS and cloud and today's applications in mind. Oftentimes, we're stuck troubleshooting things that are very messy and hard to understand and troubleshoot. We're not troubleshooting them in real time. We're troubleshooting something that happened multiple days ago that actually came in the form of a complaint by a user when they just said, hey, Zoom sucked on Tuesday. What happened? You don't have that data. You don't have anything to get into and really understand what happened at that moment. And then when you try to restructure it, you move into very complicated solutions, right? We move to this idea of, well, hey, I'm going to set these applications to this internet connection because it's supposed to be better. I'm paying more money for it. Therefore, it must be a higher quality connection. And I'm going to let other applications sit on this other internet connection because it's not as good. In either scenario, we have no concept of real-time performance. And at any given moment, that second connection may be better than the first, but we can't adapt to that in real time because it involves human intervention. These solutions, when we talk about advanced routing, are often implemented either by an expensive third party that has to come in, or someone who you may have the expertise in-house to do so, but now you're fully subject to that person's availability. God forbid they go on vacation and you have an issue, are they there to fix it? Or my other favorite solution in the complaint response phase is upgrade the internet. This is the one that I love because this is the one that we often complain to our ISP saying, hey, we don't have enough performant uptime. You're going to them with a quality issue and they come back to you with a quantity solution. They say, oh, I apologize for the amount of packet loss and latency you're having on that 100 by 100 internet connection. You need to upgrade to gig by gig. Never mind the fact that it's on the same wire, it's connecting to the same backbone, it's using all the same infrastructure, and we didn't really do anything to solve packet loss, latency, and jitter. We just gave you more speed and are making more money off you each month. This isn't a world that we can live in for an extended period of time, especially as we add more and more SaaS and cloud solutions into our environment. So at the point that this phase breaks down for you and your users, we move to strategic alignment. As I said earlier, oftentimes these conversations go from intra-team to inter-team conversations. Well, those inter-team conversations often come in the form of strategic alignment. This is when you garner the support of the executive team, finance, maybe an influential sales leader, whomever it is that says, hey, the IT organization needs the money, resources, time, and tools to fix this because this is a business-wide problem. At strategic alignment is when companies like Bigleaf get involved. You're looking to solutions that were purpose-built for SaaS and cloud connectivity and designed to help you and your team in the challenges that you're facing today, not trying to leverage solutions from roughly a decade ago. At strategic alignment, you look to tools like Bigleaf to replace manual policies with things like artificial intelligence and machine reasoning. You look to Bigleaf to move away from basic failover, moving from different IP addresses and dropping sessions, to Bigleaf's seamless same IP failover, giving you seamless failover for all of your applications as they move in between internet connections back and forth. And we replace advanced routing and complicated solutions with things like intelligent load balancing and bi-directional dynamic quality of service over public internet. Have the right foundation to really get the most out of the SaaS and cloud solutions that you and your organization are investing in, to put your users in a situation to be successful and to do their jobs to the best of their ability, making you the hero that you've always wanted to be on the IT side of the business. Fortunately for us at Bigleaf, these are where most of our customers come to us, and we're very happy to support them. With industry-leading retention numbers, the value of the solution is very evident. But our value doesn't end at simply solving the problem. We unlock a new level of insight for them. And this is where we come to innovation alignment. Again, things like AI and machine reasoning when it comes to routing, dynamic quality of service, intelligent load balancing, same IP failover. Those are all the features that may bring a customer to Bigleaf in the beginning. But oftentimes why they stay is the insights, right? We're monitoring each one of your internet connections at every one of your locations 10 times a second. We present that data back to you in the form of performance reports and our dashboard. And that data now becomes an asset for you and your IT team to begin to proactively plan, not reactively address problems, right? You can look at a given location and understand that, hey, if we're going to implement a new SaaS or cloud solution, or we're going to increase headcount, or we're going to open a new location, what do we need from an IT infrastructure standpoint? How much internet connectivity do we need? What type of internet connections do we want? You now have the data to get ahead of those issues and make sure the right foundation is in place the first time around. Going back to our friends at the senior living community, this is what it looked like for them. At the right level of internet maturity, they had the right internet infrastructure in place. They were able to turn things around and not only provide an environment that their users appreciated, but as our main point of contact put it, IT became a differentiator for their business, right? He knew that they had reached a level of success when he saw that the organization was actually marketing advanced internet infrastructure as a competitive differentiator over other competitive facilities in their market. As he put it, and I love this quote, digital transformation is only as successful as the user's experience, and the user's experience is only as good as your connectivity foundation. Hopefully, by leveraging Bigleaf and multiple internet connections, we can help you put the right infrastructure in place. So with that in mind, Alex, I would love to open it up to questions and see what people have.
Yes, definitely. So right off the bat here, does Bigleaf allow customization for app prioritization?
Yes, we absolutely do. And this is a great question. I really appreciate this because, to be honest, one of the goals for us at Bigleaf is to put you in a situation where you don't need human intervention to maximize the value of the solution. That's where AI should come in. So if we're doing our job really, really well, we've already identified the applications in your environment and prioritized them accordingly. Now, if for some reason you do have a unique application and we do need to customize a rule, we are more than capable of doing that. We expose an interface for you to do that on your own in the dashboard. But ideally, we would actually love to work with you on it. We'd love to have you call into our support organization and help us, or let us help you through that process. A, to make sure we get it right and your application gets the appropriate level of performance, but B, so we understand the application that you're using. Because oftentimes the application that you're using is the same application another customer is going to use in the future. And our AI needs to understand what that application is so we can identify and prioritize it not only for you, but for everyone else that's going to use that in the future.
Next here, if I'm in a call center environment, would Bigleaf prevent internet disruptions from dropping calls?
Absolutely. With our same IP failover, whether you're using a traditional UCAS solution or maybe SIP trunks coming into an on-site PBX or some sort of advanced routing solution, our same IP failover gives each one of those applications a public IP address for them to point at. And when we move traffic between those internet connections, that IP address remains constant, so the call itself never drops. And when we get into SIP trunks and other solutions, our same IP failover does not include anything like carrier NAT or proxy or anything like that that has a potential to mess with SIP. Rather, it's set up for seamless failover for all of those applications. So they move back and forth without any interruption to the agent or to the caller. On top of that, we're also doing that for all of your contact center and the cloud applications as well. That traffic is moving over seamlessly, as well as any SaaS applications. Maybe it's a CRM like Salesforce you're using. All of those applications are going to move back and forth. They're going to be prioritized appropriately, and they're going to be prioritized back and forth via our bidirectional dynamic quality of service.
And here's a question we get asked quite often. Will Bigleaf work with my existing firewall?
Yeah, that's always been one of our calling cards. We've taken a significant amount of pride of deploying in a manner that we are transparent to your existing security infrastructure. We see a world in which security and network, while both equally important, oftentimes decisions may be made by two different organizations or need to be looked at differently. We want to give you the ability to build whatever security infrastructure you want to, while still getting the benefits of SD-WAN without any trade-offs anywhere along the way. So we sit transparently outside of your firewall. The handoff from our Bigleaf router looks like a public internet connection with a block of static IP addresses on it when you plug it into that firewall. And for those of you that are in a more redundant environment where you have multiple firewalls, we have an HA solution that actually gives you multiple handoffs to multiple firewalls with no single point of failure on site, as well as in our backbone.
And last question here, does Bigleaf offer work from home solutions?
We do. The joys of adapting to a post-pandemic life. We do have a Bigleaf home solution. It's set up a little bit differently than the traditional Bigleaf solution. It was designed to cater to the unique needs of the home user, including asymmetric speeds, and a little bit different support solution, but is very much meant for at-home users. Nice byproduct of it, I can attest to this. Not only does Zoom play nicely and your UCAS play nicely, your SaaS plays nicely, but Netflix is remarkably clear for Bigleaf home office users, and no one will ever complain about online gaming because packet loss, latency, and jitter are excellent for Bigleaf home office users.
Looks like we just got another one. Can high priority traffic be specified?
It can, absolutely. Again, this is where we want to come back and actually collaborate with you a little bit on it. Oftentimes there is a view of what we believe to be the most important application versus from an actual performance standpoint, which one needs to be prioritized. We have plenty of customers who say, hey, my CRM application is by far the most important thing. Well, we can make sure that that application is getting the optimal level of performance, but oftentimes optimal level of performance for that application doesn't have to come at the cost of something like Zoom or RingCentral. We can still prioritize that application over what you deem to be your most important application. So collaboration is really important through those conversations.
And it looks like that's it for today. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate all the questions as well. Thanks to Jeff and Dave for taking the time to be with us today. And as I mentioned earlier, all the attendees will get an email tomorrow with a link to this recording, so feel free to rewatch and share, and thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate it.